Well, Ghana has received her worst corruption perception score in 4 years, according to the latest Global Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI. Now, this makes the Akufo-Addo-led administration's 1 year in office the most corrupt since 2012. The latest Corruption Perceptions Index, released Wednesday by the local chapter of Transparency International, that's the Ghana Integrity Initiative, GII, scored Ghana 40 out of a possible clean score of 100 and ranked the country 81 out of 180 countries assessed. The index shows that Ghana's performance has dropped by 3 points from its 2016 score of 43 and 7 points cumulatively from the 2015 score of 47. Well, I've got Mary Awinlala Ada. She's the programs manager for Ghana Integrity Initiative in the studio for discussion. But briefly before we start, here's just something to help you really understand, a quick wrap of that particular report.
Corruption Perceptions Index scores public sector corruption in 180 countries and territories around the world. Using a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is highly corrupt and 100 is very clean, this year's results show some alarming trends. More than 2/3 of countries score below 50 on the index, with an average of 43. This year, New Zealand comes out on top, while Somalia scores the worst. But no country is clean across the board. No country scores a perfect 100. Our analysis shows that countries that are lower on the index are also more dangerous for journalists and activists. In fact, one journalist is killed every week in a highly corrupt country. Low scores can also point to countries where activists are prevented from speaking out against corrupt officials. Despite efforts to combat corruption around the world, little progress has been made, and ordinary people suffer as a result. In today's environment, where there are widespread crackdowns on activists and media, the global community must do more. Help us speak out against corruption. Together, we can hold those in power to account. Visit transparency.org to learn more, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram to learn about how you can stop corruption.
So that's just to set the foundation for our discussion. Like I mentioned, I've got programs manager of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, Madam Mary Ada, here in the studio with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, this latest release is causing a lot of controversy, if I may call it, because last year we saw quote-unquote swift investigations into corruption allegations. The president was very vocal about his intentions in the fight against corruption. So the big question is, why are we seeing this despite all that we saw with regards to corruption last year?
Thank you very much, Bernice, for having me in the studio. One thing we need to recognize is the fact that the Corruption Perception Index is an aggregate score, and it captures the views and opinions of business people and experts who have done in-depth analysis on the subject matter of corruption, looking at various indicators or capturing it from various perspectives. And some of these indicators that are used in the various surveys include bribery, they include abuse of public office for private gain, they include using public office to extort or make gains, public funds misappropriation, and as it's exemplified by the Auditor General's reports that have come out over the years, we understand when we talk about using public funds which are not intended for our private use for use. And when this happens, remember also that the other indicator we are talking about is the period in which the survey is calculated. It uses a period of 12 to 24 months. And so we are talking about a period of 2016 and 2017. So it's very informative not to just say, we've seen a lot of issues happening in 2016, but why is it that these are not manifesting in the results? Remember, we do not have control over the results because these are 9 surveys captured for Ghana. And in 2016, we had 2, 2017, 7, and we have in the whole data set, 13 surveys being captured. And for any country to make it into the CPI, you should have at least 3 of the surveys being used.
Okay.
In Ghana's case, we had 9. And we are using those indicators of bribery, of extortion, of nepotism, of using public office for private gain, and of the issues of conflict of interest. And you would agree with me that these are issues we have lived with on a daily basis in the years of this service.
Now, you mentioned that you use a period between 12 and 24 months. Is that safe to say that there could be a trickling of corruption issues in 2016 for which we are seeing the score in 2017?
What we are saying is we do not want to conjecture. We do not want to make inference, but we are saying the period for the service are 2016 and 2017. So that's 24 months, and we are the calculation is done based on that.
Okay.
So we are not saying this person was there and this person is not there. And so for that matter, the issues that came up here could have informed the results that are emanating. We are talking about the period,
but I need
and we are talking about the issues, please.
I needed to explain something briefly, because we had a 2016 report that put Ghana, that gave Ghana a score of 43.
Yes.
And this 2017 gave us a score of 40. Now we are saying that the study, or this particular 2017 report, studied 2016 and 2017. It's a bit confusing how
each CPI covers a period of 24 months. So the data that is used could be just a year, but then the period is 24 months. So you can capture data from 2016 and 2017. And if you look at the release we sent out yesterday, 2 reports are from 2016, and those are the Global Insight Country Risk Ratings. That's 2016. And then we have the African Development Bank's Country Policy and Institutional Assessment, which is also from the period 2016. And so the period is what we are talking about. And in the 2016 report as well, we would have told you that the data captures the surveys from the period 2015 and 2016.
Okay.
Exactly. So that is the explanation.
So it's not
for every CPI, it's a 24-month period we are talking about when we talk about the period of the survey.
So it's not, quote unquote, entirely right to say that it's President Akufo-Addo's first year.
We do not want to get into the politics of that. We just want to look at the CPI as a calculation of expert views, the CPI as an index that is aggregating business people's opinions and experiences on their interactions in Ghana, not outside.
Okay. On
their interactions with our public sector. That is the focus.
Okay.
And so we shouldn't lose the focus to say it's either Akufo-Addo or President Mahama. What we are saying is we should focus on the issue of the public sector, where these business people engage on a daily basis, where these business people interact, and where these business people have dealings with, and where experts also have engaged and know what is happening.
Okay.
So it's not about political parties and others. We do not, CPIs are not calculated based on who is in power and who is not.
Okay, quickly, let's turn our attention to this map we see here so that you can explain what we are seeing and what it means exactly. So quickly, we'll move to that. So just briefly explain to us what's happening here, what each color means.
Exactly. So if we start from the very dark shades of red, so wherever you see a dark shade of red, it means, let me start with explaining how the points are gotten. So it's from 0 to 100. That's the scoring. So it's like you've gone to school and you are doing an exam and you score 0. 0 over 100 means, excuse me to say, you are not good, or I don't want to say thank you, failed miserably. And so as you progress, you continue to do well. So those countries which have fallen beyond expectation or who are captured below average or have failed terribly or miserably are those in the darker shades of red. And as you progress and make an impact, then the color changes. So you realize that the red changes to light red, and it changes to a very dark shadow of yellow, which is Botswana.
Okay.
That's first in Africa, and they scored 61. Please, if you can put
to Botswana, the yellow,
yes,
the one with
in Africa.
Yeah, the lightest. Okay.
You would realize there are 61 out of 100, and that is Africa.
Okay.
It's not any other place. And they rank 34 out of 180 countries in the whole universe. And so
they beat some countries even in the Americas.
Oh yes, they do well. And when you come to Ghana, specifically, you would realize that we have scored a 40, and we are ranked 81 out of the 180 countries. If you go to the darker shades of yellow, if you could point to those ones, we are in the, at least we are not even average, because there is a global average score, which is 43.
Okay.
When the index is calculated over 100, the global score is 43. So it means Ghana is below the global average. But when it comes to the African picture, the global, the African average is 32. So it means we have beaten the African average score. But that is not anything to write home about, because we scored just 40. And so we are below the global average, but then we are about 8 points up there when it comes to the African average. But countries like Botswana, when you go to the Seychelles, up there, and then the Rwandas and Malawi and Mauritius, they have done a lot better than us.
Yes.
11 countries beat us in Africa.
Okay, and so the GII and the Transparency International hope that this will help, let's focus on Africa, this will help the AU in achieving its anti-corruption theme for the year, which is winning the fight against corruption, a sustainable path to Africa's transformation. I want to use the example of Ghana because we are seen to be the beacon of Africa and a shining example. But here we are dropping points. You've been studying this for a while with corruption perceptions in Africa. Do you see hope for the continent?
There is hope. And let me say that if you read our statement, where the countries are not doing well are in areas where there is conflict, where free speech is not allowed, there's a repression of media freedoms and even the citizenry. And where we have conflicts, you realize that governance systems are not that good. There is no transparency, there's a lack of accountability, responsiveness of both public sector and the citizenry is non-existent. And so this is a mark to show us that we have a lot to do when it comes to fighting corruption. Because without good governance, without the responsiveness of our institutions, we would not be making any mark. And so we believe that the AU capturing this year as an anti-corruption year is very relevant. And these results, mind you, it's not just Africa which is not doing well. On the global scale, many countries dropped.
Even in South America, as we can see.
All of them, many countries have dropped. In fact, this year, if you compare the ranks and the scores for last year and the years that have passed. And so it means Africa has a duty to pick the lessons from the shining examples like Botswana, like the Rwandas, the Mauritius, and the Seychelles of our time, and begin to do and put in place the measures these countries are putting in place, like the ease of doing business, making business friendly, making investors comfortable to come into our countries, ensuring that public service and public servants are operating to satisfy the citizens of this country or the citizens of the continent. Because there is the general impression that sometimes public servants behave as if they are offering us a favor when we want public service. And these are hallmarks of the countries in Europe who are performing very well. If you have had opportunity to visit some of these places, you would realize that the systems are working. They are so fluid. You can sit here and apply for a passport. It will be dropped at home. You pick it up. You don't have to interact with anybody. You can sit in Joy Studios and order a ticket. You do not have to engage anybody. And so Africa as a continent must begin to pick up some of these lessons and use the scores from the CPI as a benchmark to start that process. Because we have acknowledged that we have a problem and we want to work on it. So let us use the various surveys, including the CPI, that have come out to show that we are not doing well. Because if the Europes are scoring more than 50 as their average scores, and we are on 32, then it's not the best.
Problem. Okay, so in all that you said, with the examples that you gave about ordering a ticket and all that and having it dropped at your home or in your office, is that to say there's a link between technology or the advancement of technology and corruption?
Yes, there is. It could be positive and it could as well be negative. We know for a fact that there are issues of cybercrime and the rest going on. But we also know that when we make systems or we digitize our systems, it helps us to be able to ensure that we are eliminating some of the interferences that have to do with contacting people on a daily basis. And so technology can help us and has begun, in fact, in Ghana to help us. And we know that cumulatively, if we are able to remove those negative elements, which we have encountered since the government put in place some measures, for instance, the paperless ports and others. The Registrar General is another case in point because the CPI focuses on business. So the Registrar General's department would have to set up to ensure that the processes that are ongoing, to ensure that the online registration and the ease of doing business processes are active, should be done. Because when technology is active, it takes away the human element. And when that element is taken out, we ensure that we cut away the bureaucracy and the long processes where we have to meet, I have to meet Bernice, I have to ask for an interview, and if it's not coming on, then I have to do something little to Bernice before that happens. Technology can help. Okay. But we know that when we have technology, we need to ensure that those who are operating the process have the needed expertise and integrity to do their work. Sure. Because we have heard from the implementation of the technology we just talked about that there were several impediments put in the way of people to still frustrate them to kowtow to their whims and caprices. And that is what we should be working on if we want to make progress.
Now, the word perceptions usually influences the appreciation of this particular work, the CPI I'm talking about. For many people, if this is just a perception, why a big deal?
It is not just a perception. When I said in my introductory remarks, I indicated that the perceptions are perceptions of people who have engaged. The CPI says it is a corruption perceptions index, but it is of business people who have engaged and had the opportunity to interact with the public service over a certain period, that is 12 to 24 months. And so if you say it's just a perception, okay, that's what you think this issue is. It is also what the person has experienced. And if you remember somewhere last year, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, in collaboration with 2 other civil society organizations, did a survey. And what came out, we talked about perceptions and experiences of corruption. And when we talked about the issue and asked the question, which institution do you believe is the most corrupt? That's, the police came up because everybody engages them on a daily basis. But when we asked about the experiences of corruption of the citizens, it came out clearly that those who had experienced the GRA, particularly the Customs Division, were citing that the GRA was the most corrupt, followed by the Passport Office, the DVLA, and then the police came in fourth, even though they ranked between 70% and the rest. But then that is the fact. When we are talking about perception, it's gone beyond what people perceive or what people conjecture in their minds to be happening in the institutions, public sector institutions. It is also what people have witnessed. It is also what people have experienced.
Okay, in your delivery, you spoke about how the treatment meted out to journalists, for example, the culture of silence in some countries and governance as a whole affects the score that the country gets in terms of the CPI. So in Ghana's case, what exactly led to our drop? What were the things that we considered, or what were the key examples that led to the drop?
Thank you very much. If I tell you it is this or that happened, then I would be telling a lie. But let me base it on the indicators. Okay. Bribery. Does it happen or not in our institutions? Bribery continues to be pervasive, and it continues to increase. And we have cited that over time. We say it is getting to impunity levels. In fact, people do it with such impunity and get away with it. We are talking about people using their public office for private gain. Does that happen or not? That's an indicator for measuring the CPI, and that is what I can talk to, and that's what I can affirm. Do people pick their protocol lists and things like that? Continue to happen every day. And so we say conflict of interest is one of the key indicators in this survey. Okay. And then people misappropriating funds and ensuring that there's so much bureaucracy in the system. Those are the indicators I can use to explain that this is what is accounting for our continuous drop. There are perceptions out there that the public sector is not performing as it should. And the perceptions out there also that there is a lack of sanctioning, effective sanctioning regimes, both administrative and then when it comes to our judicial sector, is the other one. We need to ensure that we deal with these perceptions, because the people who are responding to these surveys are people who are dealing with the public sector on a daily basis. So when we continue to experience those and then the perception is full, definitely it will go up. But then it is experiences and the opinions of people who have been.
So while Ghana dropped, Cote d'Ivoire went higher in 9 points. So, I mean, you're citing examples that led to that increase in points. For example, they passed a law on the prevention and repression of corruption. They set up a national anti-corruption authority and pursued compliance with some international initiatives like the Extractives Industry Transparency Initiative. Now, here in Ghana, just this week, we've seen that Parliament has approved the appointment of the special prosecutor. We've also seen a very vocal president who is committed to fighting corruption. Are we likely to see all this culminate, not to preempt what our CPI will be for 2018, but are these factors likely to give us a better outlook?
Oh, I would say yes. Yes, because if we ensure, let me give an example of one thing that has happened over time. It's the UNCAC review that was done previously. One of the things or the banes of fighting corruption which was identified was the issue that investigations, prosecution and sanctions was not being adhered to as much as it should. And so the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the review that happened in Ghana, indicated as much. And so the government putting in place a legislation and also getting somebody to focus on fighting corruption, investigation, prosecutions, and ensuring that this will culminate in sanctioning is a good move. But then basic economic theory will tell you that these things that happen in the macro level take time to manifest. And so it definitely will take time, but it would manifest. But let's be cautious again, because I've indicated that in the regimes of the paperless and the others that have gone on, we are still hearing of the public sector official putting in place impediments to the smooth functionality of these systems. So as we have the public prosecutor, whom many Ghanaians, he himself says 99% of the people of Ghana believe that he is the best person for the job. We agree that he is the best person for the job, but he's not going to work alone. And he needs independence. Apart from independence, he would need resources to be able to investigate and prosecute corruption. And we are, by this, asking that, and our advocacy should be that he is well-resourced, because resources would determine the capacity and the competence of the staffing he would have at his disposal to do the forensic audits, to do the various investigations that he would engage in, and to also ensure that people are complying with the office. When that happens, we definitely would have some gains. But if we set up the office and leave them alone, like we have left other anti-corruption institutions like our Shrajes, who are not well-resourced, we can confidently say that then we would not be making any mark. So the key thing we need to do is to ensure that this office is running, this office is well-resourced, is giving the needed manpower and financial resources to operate. And when that happens, as basic economics will tell us, the macro would manifest into the micro, and we would see it in visible terms when it comes to this course.
So those are some of the recommendations. There are a couple here in your report that government and businesses should do more to encourage free speech. But here in Ghana, we know that to a very large extent we have free speach. Joy FM together with CDD Ghana and others have started Corruption Watch, and we've been out there talking about corruption, putting the cases there, bringing audience and the general population updates. But really, while we do that in terms of putting the spotlight on corruption, is that particular element just enough to fight it?
It is not enough. We say we need, for Ghana, we indicate that we do not have the issue of free speech. And so in our recommendations, we talk about government committing more resources to implement the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. That is key, the 10-year framework to fight corruption by all stakeholders. We all must take our roles in the NACAB seriously. We all must be out there doing sensitization, raising awareness, putting in preventive measures to ensure that we curb the opportunities for corrupt behavior to happen. And we as well must all go out there to encourage and advocate that investigations, sanctioning, and prosecution happens. When we see investigations happening like you talked about earlier, and the president comes out quickly to pronounce judgment, it is difficult. In the minds of people, we begin to wonder, is the executive president an investigating authority as well? Can we allow the independent mandated investigative authorities to do their work independently? Then we can assert that independence and say, oh yes, YOCO is doing its work. It has come out with these conclusions which are acceptable to all. But when we have issues coming up and we have impediments in the way, I remember one of the cases where an issue came up, and before the committee was set up, already BNI had come up to say, oh, there was no issue. Why don't we allow the processes to unfold? Then at the end of the day, we can say, yes, this is the right thing. And every Ghanaian would accept the findings. But when we truncate these processes, then people begin to believe that there is something to hide. And those fuel perceptions, and it's not right for us.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, madam.
Thank you
She's Programs
so much,
Manager
Denise.
of GII, Mary Ada there. Well, we'll take a quick breather here. When we come back, we'll bring you business news. To stay.